Let's learn a little about each other right up front. How many of you, like me, think it's bizarre to think that one day there's going to be grandmothers named Brittany? My grandma Amber, my grandma Caitlin. That's going to be a real thing in 35 years. She'll be married to Grandpa Hudson. It's weird, right? And I hope they name their kids Edith and Mabel and we come full circle. I hope that happens. So I did something that people never do anymore, and I didn't realize it till I did it. I gave my children first names. I know some of you don't feel bad. It's a trend. I don't know if some of you are sitting right here with last names as first names. You know what I'm talking about. Taylor, Tyler, Tucker, Tanner, Mason, Morgan, Madison, Connor, Carson, Jackson, Jefferson, Hunter, Logan, Flynn. These are last names. And if you have two last names, you sound like a walking law firm. That's what you sound like. And that's too much pressure to go to college. A kid named Hunter Flynn can't dig ditches. He's got to make something out of himself, right? He's got to do something. When I say people do this, I mean Americans. This is strictly an American problem. You've never met a Mexican guy who said, "Hi, I'm Lopez Gomez." You've never met? Never once. Hasn't really taken off in that culture, if you know what I mean. Got to be careful what you name children. Even if you think you've been careful, you got to watch out for initials, especially like if you got a last name with a double meaning like I do. I was at my mother's house helping her clean out old boxes, and we found a flight itinerary. Back in the days before the internet had everything, they used to mail you an itinerary for everybody who was going on the trip. It had all your last names. We all have the same last name in my family, and the first initial of everybody else. Our last name is Strait. My name is Christopher. My brother's name is Patrick. Yeah. C straight and P straight. Yeah. I'm 43. My brother is 36. It never dawned on this woman until that moment what she had done. She sees that and just starts laughing hysterically. I stopped her. I go, "What are you laughing at? You named us." She goes, "No, that's not why it's funny." I go, "Well, then why is it funny?" "Because you're blind as a bat and your brother can't aim." You really earned that joke, Ma. You really did. Oh, it's rough having kids. I got kids myself, 4 kids. I named my daughter's my oldest. And I remember realizing when she was born, people do try to help out parents now in ways they didn't used to before. Like there was the free meal for a while there. Remember that? Every restaurant you went to, kids eat free, kids eat free. Don't they always? Were you splitting the check with a 6-year-old before that sign? Was the kid offering? I want to meet this kid. He's gonna stands up when the check gets there. "No, Mom, Dad, I got this. I got this. You guys work hard, and I just sold a treehouse, got a big commission, so..." Obviously, these restaurants, their heart is in the right place, but I think it would be more fair if they gave a discount for the whole table based on the amount of kids you had. But no, it's exactly what it sounds like. Kids eat free, adults full price. So they make you lie to them. "Oh, the kids eat free, but we gotta pay. Then I'll have the Jell-O and he'll have the steak." "Yeah, 20-ounce T-bone. Put it on the high chair." You heard me. That's it.
That's right. Blame it on the T-bone. Hello, everybody. It's Maurice Brown of The Maurice Brown Show. Welcome to the show, a comedian who has headlined comedy clubs, private events, cruises, and colleges all over the world, and has his own dry bar comedy special. Some of you may see him every week on True TV's World's Dumbest. You may also have seen him as a commentator on the E! Channel, Fuel TV's Daily Habit, and the National Lampoon film Lost Reality 2. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, with no further ado, Mr. Chris Strait. What's up, Chris? How are you, buddy?
Doing pretty good, Maurice. Thank you so much for having me.
Man, it is great to have you on the show, man. I'll tell you right now, dude, I was commenting to you before we came on live at one of the shows. Someone got really, really tickled, a female audience member. She got really, really tickled, dude, with one of the weirdest laughs. And she, hey, Chris, and then she couldn't stop.
No.
So that must have been quite interesting.
Yeah, no, it happened about 15 minutes in. When you do the tapings for Dry Bar, obviously you do two shows and they kind of pull from the best and combine them for your set.
Yeah.
But but what happened was I started hearing this midway through. She hadn't laughed like that the entire time.
Yeah.
She just starts, and the descriptions. If you watch the full set on either on Dry Bar, I don't know how much there's not like comments, but if you watch it on YouTube or Facebook, you'll see about half the comments are nice ones saying that they liked my show. The other half are all about that laugher. Like they range in description from dolphin to hyena to whatever, or to somebody left a seal in the audience. Yeah, what it is, I started hearing this shriek laugh, and at first I just figured, well, I'll ignore it and I'll plow through. Then it starts to get so pronounced, the crowd is actually laughing at it because even after the laughter dies down, she's still doing it. Yeah, and I can't see when you're up there. I mean, I'm a tall guy. I talk about it in the special, so my view of the audience is probably less far back than even the average comic. But we only get about 4 or 5 rows of clear faces. After that, it's all silhouettes. So I can't see where she is. I just know generally where it's coming from. And so you see me sort of riff and go off, and I do a bit I never planned on doing. It ends up getting a great response just because I kind of addressed it. Yeah. And so then I was able to move on after it. And even though she did shriek like that for off and on for the rest of the special, everyone, because I'd already dealt with it, everyone just kind of chuckled and kept going. And then after the show, this group comes up to me, and it's not what you're expecting. It's not an older woman. It's not somebody carrying oxygen. It's not somebody in a wheelchair. Yeah. It's you're very pretty 21, 22-year-old BYU student. You tape right there next to BYU. Yeah. She's on the ballroom dancing team. I guess BYU has one of the best ballroom dancing programs. So the lungs on this woman are probably very impressive. And all of her friends were sitting there just dumbfounded, like we had no idea. I forget her name, but we have no idea she laughed like that until just now. Yeah. Wow.
Well, now, see what happened, Chris. You really got her, dude. I mean, you really, literally tickled her, and you were handling that quite well because dude, it had to have been extremely awkward. But you kept coming up with jokes. I could tell you were trying to keep things moving, and she just kept doing it with the laugh.
Well, what I talked about
was funny as heck.
Yeah, no, what I talked about was how, don't try to hold in a laugh, no matter what it sounds like, let it out. Because I felt like maybe that was the problem, is that she was trying so hard to stifle it that it was getting worse. So I was trying to encourage people. So I do a bit about how women snort, about how men get gassy later and things like that. Just about things that happen when you hold in a laugh that thankfully I already had in my head. Hadn't planned on doing it that night. But yeah, I mean, I've been doing this 21 years. There's very little that can happen on stage I'm not ready for.
I could tell you're completely comfortable up there, and I've had that happen. It seems like the young girls are like that. As that's happened to me before too. The weirdest laugh that you've ever heard come out of such an individual. It's like, where did that come from? How could that come out of you? But that was a great job, man. You were killing them. You were killing them. So we're in this pandemic, Chris.
Oh, yeah.
We're all, as comedians, trying to figure out how to navigate through it. What are you doing right now to deal with the current situation?
Well, I mean, as I have 4 children, including my stepson, so there's never a shortage of things to do. Been doing a lot of Zoom shows to stay active. In fact, that's kind of, why I've gotten used to. This is about the 5th or 6th platform that we're on now that offers this. So yeah. It's as if the way that streaming shows, to explain to the general audience, the way that streaming shows and platforms have taken off, try to imagine if within 6 months of them inventing Coke, out came Pepsi, RC, Shasta, and all the other ones within 5 months, and it was dizzying. And you still referred to it as Coke, but you didn't know which one you were doing. And am I expecting this one, but I'm going to taste this one. So yeah, between Zoom, Microsoft Teams, all these different platforms, some of them need to be invited, some of them don't. It's like all of a sudden every comedian has to be an IT, expert.
Yeah. I mean, you got to really know what you're doing. I mean, my kids hooked me up. My kids are in their early 20s. So, I mean, they're young, but they're the generation that's got this stuff on lock. So that's the other reason I'm doing this. They had to hook me up and everything. But so you're in California, right?
Correct. Yeah. Just south of Los Angeles.
So are you guys doing shows outside?
We were in like September and October. They were starting to come back. In fact, I even did a road gig in Cheyenne. I did a couple outdoor ones where people sat spaced out. And but yeah, they were starting to come back. Then we re-locked down. And since then, I haven't even heard of them really doing any. It's pretty much all been the streaming shows.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think about performing on this Zoom platform as far as doing your stand up? I mean, is it awkward for you? I mean, or have you just pretty much gotten used to it and you just keep it moving?
Well, both. It's awkward, and I've gotten used to it.
Yeah,
So what I
yeah,
mean by that is that there's certain, you never know how many. I mean, if they got a company of 500 people, they can't leave everybody's sound on.
yeah,
They have to designate people, and what if they don't know how to do that? Most of the shows, I got to say, 95% have gone off without a major hitch. I mean, there's almost always some problem on the way in where you got to click or re-click on something. There have
yeah,
been a few times where I was trying to do it in the back of my house where the Wi-Fi wasn't as strong and the picture kept freezing. So I've had technical things to overcome. But yeah, there were a couple of shows where they literally had no ability to turn on the master sound. So I had to pretty much
yeah,
do my set. And you never realize, even 2 or 3 people chuckling is enough for you to gain your timing. But when you're
yeah,
doing it and just sitting there, you're wondering, all right, is this quiet because I can't hear them? Or is this quiet because they hate this? Do I need to switch tracks, talk about something else? And if you're doing a bunch of like private parties in a row, like every different company, some of them want to tell you all about them. And then, others just want you to do your set and not a single thing. So it depends. I mean, there've even been, I wouldn't say hecklers like no one mean, but there've even been people who are trying to talk out during the show and say things. I'm like, buddy, you can't do that on this platform. I have to scroll over to see you. I don't know who said that. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, that's already not a good idea in a live club. It's a terrible idea now.
yeah. A Zoom heckler is really bad. I can only imagine. I haven't had that happen to me yet. That's funny though, man. What do you do with that? It's already bad enough when you're doing it live. So that being said, Chris, do you think this is going to be a new normal situation that we're in right now?
No, well, again, I hope not. What I think will happen is pretty much what will happen across the board after this pandemic is that we'll go like 75% back to the way it was.
Yeah.
But there's aspects of this that will always be around. I think we're going to see people in our society wearing masks on the par of the way they will if you go to an Asian country, even not during a pandemic. 1 in every 7 or 8 people will still just be having a mask on walking around society. I think I think that's going to be a new normal. I think there will social distancing will likely go away just because our society can't function long term with not filling to capacity. It's just not what we're what we're wired for in our economy.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same thing too. There will be Zoom shows when you need to do something across the board. Like there are a lot of companies that told me that when I was doing their Christmas party, this is the first time they've had the whole company in one room because it was a virtual room. Normally they had to have the LA team and the Chicago team and the Memphis team and the Sydney team all do this together. Now the Sydney team is having breakfast and the New York team is having drinks, but they're all on it together. So I feel like those companies will maintain Zoom in that way because they're maintaining it for their business more often now.
Right.
And I say Zoom, we're on a different platform now. Obviously there's several different ones, but StreamYard is where we are now. But any number of these Microsoft Teams, Cenex, all those will still be with us. I just don't think they'll be as prevalent. I mean, like was working primarily on cruise ships. I think those will come back, but I mean, I think serving yourself at the buffet is probably over. I think they're going to be scooping for you. They were doing that the last week before they shut down. They had to serve you. And I just remember joking on stage, great, now I have to tell this man and get a reaction from him about what a glutton I am. I can't just scoop it and walk away. I need to get judged.
So, Chris, you are a very tall person.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've had people come up to you and say, "Hey, you're pretty tall."
Yeah.
Do you have tall people issues, Chris?
I don't anymore because I've gotten used to it. I mean, your patience with it goes down though. Like I got really tall and just I can't do anything functional with it. I mean, I was on the basketball team, but I wasn't good. My joke is always I was on the team, but just for color. They needed more white guys, and that was it. That's what I was doing there. I was born in Inglewood, California, grew up in Ladera Heights, 5 minutes away from the Forum when Magic and Kareem were winning all the championships. It was a basketball crazy town.
Wow.
I just had no skills. I tried. But, and I think also my vision going bad and being too stubborn to put contacts in as a teenager hurt that too. So I always say now it's just a life of not fitting anywhere. Not that I don't like being tall, but 6'2" or 6'3" would have been fine. I would have been done there. But 6'6" is like, you get that reaction. Wow, you're tall. And you end up with your comebacks. Like if they say, how's the weather up there? You spit on them and say it's raining. If they ask you if you play basketball, you say no. Do you play miniature golf? There's all kinds of comebacks to if it's a short person, or it's like, wow, you're tall. You act like you didn't know it. You go, oh my God, you're right. And you look around. So there's always comebacks if somebody's rude. But if people are nice, then I just sort of smile and nod.
Yeah, tall people problems, flat out discrimination, Chris. I like what you said, though. You were on the basketball team just to add a little color.
Yeah.
I can tell you this, though. I got 3 kids, like I said, 24, 22, and 19. And I tell them, I used to tell them all the time when they were growing up, hey, listen, you're not thugs, okay? Yeah. Just understand that. You have a dad who's a black man that talks like Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
Not gonna happen. Just stop it right now.
Yeah.
But Chris, I do want to ask you about your start in comedy. It's really interesting because you're in college and you're doing a thesis on humor, and from there goes the story. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, actually, I knew I loved stand-up since I was 8 years old. I mean, looking back, I would, play. I find my parents and grandparents' old Bill Cosby and Bob Newhart and Smothers Brothers records, and we're talking that far back. Yeah, and I would play those. But you just think you're a fan of something. You don't think you're going to do it. And then, when I was 13, I found my dad's Richard Pryor's Greatest Hits, and
there you go.
That was the summer that Andrew Dice Clay became big. So I remember like, oh my God, you can be dirty and do this too. So it's like, I'd seen the cleanest and I'd seen the dirtiest. And so I was just enthralled. And then back then, stand-up was on every channel. So I would watch it all the time. Yeah. And I just thought, Fox had a couple of shows. MTV had a show. VH1 had a show. A&E had a show at the Improv. And growing up in LA.
I remember that, yeah.
And growing up in LA, as soon as I was 17, and I didn't realize this at the time, but in the early 90s, it was the comedy bust. Things were closing. Yeah. So they were desperate for tickets. They were throwing them out to free people. The Santa Monica Improv, which became a Hooters later. I used to go there at 17 and was just soaking it up. But still, in my head, for some reason, I never got on stage. I fantasized about it, but never thought, like, there's no performers in my family. I just thought, all right, this is just something I like. But then, in the middle of grad school, I just said, you know what? That's enough. I'm going to try this. I'm 24. I'm going to get on stage. And literally in the same week, I had a bad experience in the clinics in grad school with my evaluation, and I got on stage and got laughs and just loved it. So it just shifted my track. I walked right into my advisor and said, I don't want to do the clinical work. Just let me write a thesis, and switch my major from clinical psych to general psych. And that's all I did for the next 6-9 months. I researched this thesis, wrote it, and by that time I was already getting paid to do stand-up.
Wow. It seems like every kid growing up in our era had Richard Pryor albums under their bed.
Oh, yeah.
But, the thing about it is Richard Pryor, and I'm a clean comic, but one thing about Richard Pryor, for me, as he's got to be, and you could argue George Carlin as well, but he's just the funniest, most spontaneous comic I've ever seen. A lot of people try to compare him to, they say Eddie Murphy and then Dave Chappelle, and then they're great. But it's just something about Richard Pryor's spontaneity and realism about where he was. And here's the deal. I'm a clean comic, but guess what? Richard Pryor was speaking his truth. Yeah. And as a comedian, that's what you have to do. You'd like to be clean if you can. I generally am, because guess what, Chris? I don't walk around, and profanity is not a part of my vernacular in my real life. So it's pretty easy for me to do clean comedy. Now, what about yourself? I saw your dry bar. It was awesome. And I tell a lot of comics, hey, at least put it in your toolbox.
Yes, so exactly.
Dry bar special.
No, and that's actually how it happened for me. It's just a work of attrition. I never tried to write clean or dirty. If I thought, because I was a fan of acts that were both. Yeah. And just to go backwards with your point, if you ask, I love Dave Chappelle. He's probably the greatest that there is now in the modern era. Yeah. But if you ask people like him, I'm a huge boxing fan. They said Muhammad Ali was one of the greatest. But if you ask him who the greatest was, he would have said Sugar Ray Robinson. So I always tell people, pay attention to who does the greatest think is the greatest. And Chappelle said unequivocally Richard Pryor. It's a different time, a different era. We had longer attention spans then. We could listen to stories and character development. But before Pryor and Carlin did that, where they sort of rejected it being an act and were just getting real on stage, that had not been done. And they did it the best at that time period. But for me, it was just honestly through attrition. If you had asked me for the first 15, 16 years what kind of comic I was rating wise, I would have said PG-13. And that if it's a rough room or if I'm feeling in kind of a mood, I might swear a little bit more than others. But for the most part, I have a PG-13 act, and if it's a PG room, I'll clean it up a little. If it's an R-rated room, I'll dirty it up a little bit. I mean, you go to the biker bar with your dry bar set, you might put them to sleep. And if you show up to the church with your, with your set you just did at the oil drillers convention, it's like you're probably not going to go over too well. So when I went on cruise ships, though, you have to break it up. I mean, a lot of cruise lines only want you to do your cleaner things, and others want you to do clean and dirty broken up.
Okay.
And I've had to do private parties where I was just clean. I had to do bar shows where I was just dirty. So I had to really design the act around that. And then you get out there doing it. Living in LA, being a road comic, I was also a booker. I had other little side jobs. Even being a headliner, it's hard to support yourself in Los Angeles with what comedy pays a non-famous person. So I always had a side hustle. But on these ships, I didn't need a side hustle. I was making enough to just do stand-up. So I wrote. In 2019, I put out 3 CDs. One was clean. 2 others, one was R-rated and one was more PG-13. And the reason for that is because I had to do those sets separately on the ships. And it's just the demand for the clean one has been way, way more lately. And because because nowadays, especially with people, I do a lot of rants about it. People aren't really as offended as they're making it sound, but it's trendy to act offended. So with that,
kind of seems that way. Yeah.
No, and there's never, and I think it was Christopher Hitchens that said, we will never appease the ambulance chasers. Like you can never be, they get off on being offended. They'll keep moving the marker until they find something. And it's insulting to keep trying to appease them. Just do your thing. And I started just writing in that vein more. And it's just, I don't know if it's my look or my sound, but I sound like a talk show host or a game show host or look like one, but people seem very comfortable with me having kind of a clean, irreverent style. So that's how I arrived at it.
Well, and as we talk about styles and how easily offended the culture seems to be in this era of comedy, let me ask you this. Do you think comedy has become too politically correct in our era?
Well, I just think that the pressure being put on comedians is very hypocritical. I mean, you don't like Jim Norton even said it. He goes, well, comics shouldn't pick on someone who's viewed as more oppressed than them. They should punch up. I go, really? Why do only comedians have to punch up? If Stephen King writes a story where children are getting murdered, you don't say he's picking on children. You say he's telling a story. Someone writes a song about handicapped people. You don't say he's picking on handicapped people. He's shining a light on it. It used to be comedians were given credit for that as well. But now every joke is viewed as picking on. But at the same token, it's creating one heck of a backlash. It's not a coincidence that in this very same era, roasts are big business. People want to hear and again, it's sort of the comedy world is mirroring my act. It went from all being kind of in the middle to going polar opposite. You're either not offending anyone or you're on purpose going after everything. I mean, I think it's why Family Guy, that's behind me over here. Stayed on the air. Yeah, my wife got that done. My whole family, plus Peter and Stewie, made as Family Guy characters. I talk about my blended family, all the different hair colors of everybody from my ex-wife and my current wife. Yeah, that's a picture of that back there. But that show has definitely maintained, Simpsons and South Park too, an audience because it has not tried to appease. It's steered harder. It's like the more you tell me not to do something, I'm going to do it.
Well, if there's something about stand-up comedy today that if there are hot subjects or what have you, there are hot spots that, will just, oh my gosh, I don't know what it is. And I don't think you should really care as a comedian. The only ones that have the right to say, well, I don't care and I'm not even going to show up and take your gig are people like Jerry Seinfeld and Dave and these type of guys, they have the ability to say, well, I won't take your show. But as you're trying to make a name for yourself, you have to learn how to navigate around these topics. And so you're learning a new skill set. You're forced to learn a new skill set in the kind of era that we're in right now. So I look at it as more of a fun challenge to go for it and see if I can get away with it.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, and Seinfeld and Chappelle talk about polar opposites of who's supposed to be G-rated or PG versus R-rated.
Yeah.
And even though Chappelle's not swearing that much, his topics are certainly, more on the R-rated side. And when the trans people tried to kind of go after it, he canceled the cancelers. And that's happening more now where it's like, no, I will I will make fans out of you. And he's done that, because no one wanted to be viewed as the person who was the hater, because he made himself, the one that, like, if you try to come after him, a world of hurt is brought down on you. And so that's what we were missing from the last few years. And for Seinfeld to sort of say it too, he goes, look, if you can be offended by me, I love that Jim Gaffigan finally stated his political views. This idea that, comedians just stick to comedy. Well, our job is to study the human condition. What do? You're a plumber? Stick to plumbing. Why do you have more of a right to talk about things than me when my job involves studying the human condition? Yours involves studying pipes. If I try to talk to you about pipes, then I'm a social justice warrior and I need to shut up. But if you're talking to me about the comedian doesn't mean he automatically knows more than the plumber, but the odds are certainly greater that he does. And Gaffigan came out and he was a Midwestern, clean comic, white guy. He performed for the Pope. You mentioned challenges. Yeah. But yet, no, he went on social media. He finally had enough. He goes, no, I'm tired of this nonsense. I said Trump is evil. It's horrible that anyone would vote for him. He stated what he felt. He goes, I don't care how many fans I lose over this. How much money do you need at a certain point? And there were these people writing things like, 90% of people defended him or said, I disagree, but that's your right. You're still a funny guy. But there were as many of those, there were a lot of them going, I was a fan, not anymore. My family in America, I can't believe you, whatever. And it was like this new attitude that you have to agree with someone to laugh at them. I remember laughing at Rush Limbaugh's show in the early 90s. I didn't agree with much of what he was doing, but back then he was an entertainer and he was funny about things. Like if he catch someone in an inconsistency, he'd make a face. And I laughed at it the same way I'd laugh at Bill Maher, who I'm much more likely to agree with. But it's kind of a new thing now where they felt like, well, even though you never talk about politics, because I know you disagree with my politics, I won't even support your comedy. And and so it is kind of a risk in that sense. They say, like, you limit your money, but for the people, I'm glad that the people who no longer need the money are finally taking a stand. That's what'll end the offended culture, I think.
Well, what's happening right now is a reflection of the offended culture. I mean, I've never known of a time. I mean, it's downright American to make fun of your president.
Yes.
Hey, it's un-American not to make fun of the president. I mean, this is what we do. We've always done that, and it's always been funny. But now we've gotten to this part of our history where we're so divided that we can't talk about very many things, including the president. It's like a hard line of division. Yeah. And I'm like, these are just jokes for the people that are making jokes. And just take it for what it is. It's just not that serious. If I think that Donald Trump is an idiot, so what?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not the end of the world. Next thing you know, somebody wants to come after you with guns. Well, so that's the.
I've been warning people for years that I said, look, it's more and more politics. I hate the two-party system. I think there should be 4 or 5 different options. We don't need to be like Italy. They got like 100 political parties. It can get ridiculous. But we need 4 or 5 because this black and white, red and blue thing that's going on leads into hate very well. We've turned politics into a college football game, like, or a pro sports game. Like, you hated that guy when he was a Celtic. Now he's a Laker and you love him. That's why I say that's exactly what that's fine though. That's sports. It means nothing. It's just entertainment. But for our politics, no, come on now. You need to be able to be consistent. And there's no attempt by either side, but it's been more vocal on the right lately to even hide the hypocrisy. It's like, you hated this when they did it. You loved it when he did it. It's like, did you just see these two posts are right next to each other, but this attitude that you don't even need to. And I don't like how politicians are kind of being trained to steer towards that. I mean, it's pretty scary. If you Google some of the speeches from people before they were running and then after, it's like they've been told to say certain things, not say certain things, depending on who they're going after, to start sounding dumber on purpose. Yeah. Like, you Google Bush before he was running. It's like, wow, that's kind of a smart guy, George W. Then all of a sudden he's saying evildoers and terrorists and nuclear. You think he didn't know how to, guy went to Ivy League schools. Think he doesn't know how to say that? Yeah. Yeah. You think Ted Cruz doesn't know that the Paris Accords aren't about the city of Paris? No, he got his contingency. He's been told are dumb people, whether they are or not. He's been told that. Well, by the time we realized it, I mean, once we got to know him as our president,
And we realized that, oh, you really didn't earn your way into Yale. Anyway, let me let me just say this to you, Chris. You've done comedy all over the world.
Yeah.
One of the things I've always found intriguing about comics that go to an Italy or a Montreal or the UK and do really well, have you found it more challenging to get your punchlines landed in other countries?
No, it depends on where you're going. Like, because it's really a weird thing, especially in the post-YouTube age, because a lot of other cultures that we didn't even know laughed in those countries. Now they like comedy, and 90% of what they've seen have been Americans.
Yeah.
So you might go to the Middle East. And I've heard Gabriel Iglesias and Russell Peters. I haven't seen him in years, but I opened for him a few times. And he'll even say, it goes, yeah, they may do nothing else in the in an American sense, except for the way they laugh and the things they laugh at.
Okay.
And I talk to friends like, what do you do when you perform in Shanghai and like that? As a guy said, just relationships. Everybody's married or has been in a relationship. Talk about that. They all know it. Yeah. Other times you'll get in front of people that like, because you're American, they're actually kind of into it. There were a lot of Canadian audiences that kind of want to, because of the tongue-in-cheek rivalry we have and just Canadian crowds being so excellent with comedy. In fact, it's often a joke when you're on a cruise ship with old people like Princess or Holland that has an older crowd. They're like, look, just look for a few chuckles. You're not going to be killing in that room, which is true of most of the Princess cruises I've been on. But Holland, when it's a ton of Canadians, Canadian 80-year-olds laugh like American 50-year-olds. They don't care anymore. Yeah, but they can keep laughing. South Africans too. They have things in common with us that they don't have anywhere with anyone else.
Yeah.
So, like the racial struggles, like the crime struggles, like the division of wealth, even the same colonial powers, the English and the Dutch and all that.
Yeah.
So if you touch on some of that and they know you're smart about it, then they're really into it. Then, you get in front of some Australian to a lesser extent, but British audiences, especially upper class British audiences, and they'll just hear that you're American and you've got strike 1 and 2 against you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like they love certain ones. Like Australia, they made stars out of Eddie Ifft and Arj Barker, 2 American comics who are, headliners. They're doing well here, but they're not stars. They're arena acts over there. But they definitely want to hear right away that you're not going to do a goofy act, that you're going to be intelligent.
Yeah. Yeah. Bill Burr said that he had a great run over in Europe, but he got over, I guess, to Austria. And a couple in that pocket of Europe, and that was the only time where he bombed over there because they were trying to solve the problem. They were saying things like, "Why don't you just tell them you're sorry?"
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you don't have to come up with an answer; just laugh.
Well, I've been to Germany a bunch, and they are very intellect. I mean, Patton Oswalt made fun of it. Goes, they're the sweetest people in the world, but man, no sense of humor. They don't get sarcasm; it's not their thing. And others just don't laugh hard. There's some crowds where like they enjoyed it to their level, but they're just not big laughers. I remember, and there's other times where I was expecting that, like on a Princess cruise from San Francisco. I go, oh God. I'm going to have the older conservatives and the guilty white liberals. This is going to be terrible. They're going to be staring at me. I had 4 killer shows. They loved I even got to do my ethnic material on a Princess cruise, which you almost never would get to do, but they were loving it because all they wanted to see was that I was fair. I got on their side as a Californian within the first couple of minutes, and I just carried it all. But again, that exact same cruise out of LA to Mexico, and I had a group that was exhausted and fallen asleep in their chairs, smiling, but not laughers.
It's funny when you talk about ethnic jokes. I've found that churches are very reluctant to entertain that subject matter.
Well,
can you think of a more unbelievable, but yeah.
Can you think of a more accidentally segregated group? It's true. I hate it, but it's true. You go to places like that. I mean, in my neighborhood that I live in, Torrance, it's a little bit of everybody, but it's mostly Asian and Caucasian. But yeah, but there's some Hispanic, some African American. It's a little bit of everything. But the church right next to me, and man, it's almost all white. And then if I go 10 blocks over into Carson, there's a church that's almost all black. I go a little bit north. I see the Spanish writing. It's all Latino in there. Now, these are not racist people. They live amongst each other, and but for whatever reason, they don't tend to worship together. I feel like they think if you start talking about it, that they feel like, well, maybe you should mention that if there's more representation in the room. They don't want you talking about it because they're like, what? Okay, if you're going to do some, Filipino jokes, we should have some Filipino people in here, shouldn't we? And they kind of freeze up because of that, I would think,
Well, yeah, and I've always found that very intriguing. So, I mean, over time, I've learned the kind of subject matter to stay away from when I'm in churches. But you were talking about some really iconic comedians earlier. I was wondering, who are some of your comedy heroes?
Like I said, when I first started, I'd say comedic movies were my main thing. When I first started watching, like I said, the albums and stuff, I liked the characters that Bob Newhart did and all that stuff, and Smothers Brothers and their songs. I couldn't do any of that stuff, but and Bill Cosby himself was an iconic one. It started there, but then after a while, you get into a teenager, you have a rebellious streak. It shifted to like I loved Kinnison, and Bill Hicks. Bill Hicks was one of my heroes. I'd loved for him to still be around now. The things he was talking to be a Southern. A Southern guy from Texas talking about the stuff he was talking about, working the rooms he was working about. I haven't seen that bravery out of a modern comic at all. And he became a bigger star in England. Again, like I said, they loved what he did there. Even though he was American, he ran into a lot of trouble here, but obviously died young from cancer. Modern day, I'd say Chappelle and Bill Burr are the two best, but Doug Stanhope, I've always thought was great. I mean, what he and Patrice O'Neill do is not a guarantee, so you can swing and miss with what they do. But when the two of them are on, I've never seen anybody in a modern era that did it better. Well, did it, obviously Patrice has passed away 10 years ago, but those two when they were on, I've never seen a room like out of air from laughing that hard at scary things that if you'd have told them the topics ahead of time, you might have cleared half the room. I find controversial comedians to be quite intriguing. Oh yeah.
And there are some, you mentioned Bill Hicks, and there's some other guys. I don't know if Sam Kinison was necessarily controversial, but he was a wild dude. But one guy, have you ever heard of Corey Holcomb?
Oh yeah, Corey. I did a couple shows with him around LA, but what he does is a risk too. I mean,
well listen, Corey, it's amazing, and either this is what tells you that you just have a comedian's heart.
Yeah.
Like, I'm watching Corey Holcomb with my wife, and I'm just losing it.
Yeah.
I'm just losing it, dude. And you know the type of subject matter that Corey Holcomb.
Yes.
And it was wildly hilarious. Now, it can be, depending on how you view things, wildly controversial. And my wife looked at me and she said, "Do you think this is funny?"
The part where
I don't know what came over me, babe. Let's change the channel.
Yeah. Well, Corey Holcomb and Jim Jeffries, another guy who's bigger in our country than his own, an Australian guy, because of the way he does things.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the two of them, you keep waiting for their audience to have, like with every passing special, you keep waiting for Corey and Jim's audience to have no women in it. But every passing special, there are as many women, and they are cracking up because they're tired of what the women's movement is. It's definitely necessary, and everything about what they're saying for equality is absolutely correct. Yeah. However, there is a lot of hypocrisy in any movement. Yeah. And for these two guys to be pointing it out, or to just, in Corey's case, talking about the worst aspects often of human nature from a relatable point of view. And Jim even called it out once in a special. Their skill, Corey and Jim, they can do things and still seem likable that you and I would be booed off stage for trying. Like the things that they're saying, that people are laughing and chuckling at either the way they're saying it or how they're not exempting themselves from it. Yeah, they become, people are laughing hysterically at this, and I'm just watching going, I could never do what they're doing without and still keep my job.
Well, see, here's the thing. A guy like Corey Holcomb, just as an example, is sold out to the genre that he's presenting. Yeah. When Corey Holcomb hits the stage, I mean, he's got a shot glass and an OG hat like myself.
Yeah.
And he's letting you know from the opening tip, Chris, this is gonna be ghetto.
Yeah. Exactly.
He's just letting you know, full transparency, guy. We're getting ready to get real ghetto right now.
No, and it is. Ghetto is a good term.
And he's sold out to that style.
Yeah, no, but Eddie Griffin will often say that too, and yet still, and it's so ghetto that it's not relatable. Whereas Corey says that, and then he goes on to do things that, yes, this is presented in a ghetto fashion. But believe me, there are suburban white people watching this who are relating to 70 to 80% of what he's saying. So it's, they may not be able to talk about it, but he's providing something very welcome. And for Jim Jeffries, same thing, to point out hypocrisies in women's movement. Oh, you ask for this equality, but what about when this happens to men? Yeah. He doesn't just say it like he's preaching. He says it in such a way that you can't argue with him, but he's embodying the frustration of it.
Yeah.
And his accent makes a lot of things forgivable too. I forget who pointed it out, but you ever notice like Americans don't like their political comedy shows from other Americans? Think about it. Bill Maher's the last one. He's the last one left. Samantha Bee is Canadian. Trevor Noah is South African. John Oliver is British. And Jim Jeffries is Australian. Which, for whatever reason, we think, I don't know why we think maybe it's funnier in their voice. But yes, like we don't like comedian pundits from
I got one for you. I've got an American comic. You may or may not agree. You said you were a fan of his, Bill Maher.
Yeah, he's the last one left is what I'm saying. He's like the only one left. Yeah.
Yeah, he gets away. It almost cost him his career, but he survived it.
Well, he's got an elder statesman status in comedy now, like kind of what Carlin had at the end. Carlin could walk into a room with notes, bits that were not the slightest bit formed, and offend everybody in that room. And they would all walk away thinking, wow, that wasn't very funny. But they would still sit there quietly, let him do it. They understood what he was doing. Like there was this guy wasn't getting booed off stage for the things that we would. He had this thing of, okay, look, whether we're laughing or not, he's forming this into something. And this is still an amazing moment to even listen to this guy. And I think that Bill Maher's gotten to that point. They may not think it for the same reasons, but where you're like, his sarcasm, he's still, you run the gamut of emotions listening to Bill Maher. Listen to any political comic that's good. Like you're laughing, but you might leave there angry about the topics he brought up, like not mad at him.
Yeah, you might. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mad at the other side or mad at something they reminded you of. And that's a risk because even if somebody likes you and thinks you're funny, if they're stewing in their own juices because of a topic you brought up, you always do that to one or two people in the crowd. But to do it to the whole crowd and bring them back is one heck of a skill.
That's true. Now, Chris, you've performed in all 50 states.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to which state or even city you find to be the best place to do comedy.
Well, I'm from LA. I found Southern California to be the most varied. Like you can literally get any audience here that you want. Okay. Now, I've heard that about New York, but I've performed in New York a lot and I like New York. It's a very wizened comedy audience. But if you're in Manhattan, 90% of your crowd will be tourists. That's just the way they fill those clubs.
Okay.
Whereas here, if you stay out of Hollywood might still have some of that and a lot of industry people that are jaded. But if you go to the Ice House, Comedy Magic Club, anything up in Ventura or Santa Clarita Valleys or down in Orange County, you've got the best combination of a diverse, killer audience that knows enough about comedy to get virtually everything, but yet not so inundated like the industry folks in Hollywood that they won't even laugh anymore. It's the perfect combination, I find. You give me a place like, Brea or Culver City, or give me a crowd in one of those towns, and that'll be my favorite show. But again, I'm biased being from here. Probably my favorite room of all time is the Throckmorton Theater in Mill Valley, Northern California. That was an amazing place. I mean, the theater would fill up on a Tuesday. I mean, just mostly rich white people, but they laughed at absolutely everything. They grew up during the San Francisco comedy boom. Robin Williams and Dana Carvey lived up there and would drop in and do sets. Bobcat Goldthwait, Mort Saul, comedy legends from way back would come in.
Yeah,
I'd be listening to conversations in the green room between people like, is this really happening? I had to open for Richard Lewis once, and the way they do it is they would surprise guest the big name.
Okay.
So I'm the last comic on the bill, they think. Yeah. And then they're going to bring up the star. I've done it a bunch of times. Mark Pitta was the guy that ran the room. He was a local celebrity up there and a great comic.
Yeah.
But Richard Lewis doesn't like to hang out before the show. So your instructions when you're opening for Richard is whenever he pulls up, he wants to walk in backstage, go right on. So you might be 5 minutes in, you might be 30 minutes in. Now, he doesn't try to screw anybody. He tries to make it on time, but they told me, if he's not here in 15 minutes, go along. Well, this crowd keeps coming back. They've seen me about 6 times in the last 3 years. I don't know if I have 15 new minutes or more than 15 new minutes to give them where I'm not regurgitating old bits. So I do my 15, do my 20. I can't see backstage. Finally, I say, good night. And I walk and he had just opened the door. So it was perfect timing. But for the most consistently good shows and good experience was probably at that room.
So that's a pretty interesting story. There are comics. It's kind of interesting you mentioned that about Richard Lewis. There are comedians where they have most comics have kind of a ritual or a process that they kind of go through to stay loose, calm, whatever, just to be ready. I mean, there are comics that you can't come within 10 feet of. You could see that shield around them, like, don't come near me.
Yeah.
There are some guys like that. I like to chit chat before I go on. I try to keep it as normal as possible. And I don't want to look at anything that I've written when I'm at the venue. I don't want to see anything that I've written. Mm-hmm. What is your process in staying calm before you go on stage?
It depends on the show and what's at stake or how long it's been. Like my first live show, after a while, I was nervous. It was a house party. I was doing 45 minutes. They want you to be fairly clean. It was in a backyard. I hadn't been on a stage in 6.5 months. And that's the longest I'd gone without performing in 20 years of doing it. This is just last year. And they were nice people. I was able to do a little riffing. I jumped right back in as if it was nothing. But my process, I've made sure to try to have as little a process as possible. That way, nothing is throwing you off. I do often look at the act right before I go up. But at the same time, I try to forgive myself if I don't stick to that, because I know there's going to be things I forget. I know I'm going to just let it take me the way that it does. I'll get off stage and go, wow, I didn't do 2/3 of what I thought I was going to do. And then immediately a second voice comes in. Yeah, but you filled the time and they laughed. So who cares?
There you go.
Perfect, but it worked. So, and then I go over it again and I remember those things because I forgot them, and then I won't forget them the next time. So, but I used to have a thing where I didn't want to eat right before a show. Now, if it was socially acceptable, I could eat on stage. I don't even care. But I do, and it does affect you. There was a club I worked, the first club I headlined like 17 years ago in Calgary, and I was drinking too much bottled water through the set and before it. And I made this mistake, like literally 3 nights in a row. The last 5 minutes of my set, I'm literally doing the pee-pee dance. I had to go so bad.
Yeah.
But at the same time, these guys have to set up the check drops. I'm a headliner doing an hour. If the checks aren't out, I can't bail. So I had to just sit there and kind of rock in the chair and do the thing. It goes like that. And he sends up a shot for everyone to do. And back then I was drinking, Now I maybe have one and that's it. But and so I had to do the shot and lead them in a thing. And a shot of alcohol just releases the hounds on your bladder. So I literally, 2 of the nights, I even gave up trying to sell my CD afterwards. I just sprinted to the back and then went to the bathroom, then came out, and whoever was still there, I could try to sell.
Yeah. Now, Chris, you have a show on True TV called.
It's an Escalon. I wanted to mention that. No, it's still being rerun in in reruns, but it just lets you know about the show. They started in 2008. I think it went off the air in 2015.
Okay.
I was only on it for 2 years, 2010 to 2012.
Okay.
It's talking head stuff. People do dumb stuff. They videotape it, they record it, they send it in, and then we get it ahead of time and make comments about it.
Okay.
And I was on that show for 2 years, about 20 or so episodes a year. They still rerun it. It's been 8.5 years. And every now and then I'll still have someone go, hey, I saw you on True TV. I go, wow. So they still rerun it every so often. Now, sadly for me, it's a basic cable show, non-union, didn't pay residuals. So I don't still get any money for it. But it was the most fun job I've ever had in television. I haven't done a ton in television, but I mean, it was a great gig to have for a couple of years there.
Wow, well, I had no idea, and it's too bad you don't get residual pay for that. That's pretty surprising. So I was showing before the show started your bit from the Dry Bar Comedy Special out there in Provo, Utah. I've heard nothing but great things about the way they treat the comics out there. I mean, like royalty and so forth. What was your experience like out there?
It was great. I had known the booker of that just from doing a couple. I mean, it was one of the first clubs I worked back in 2003, and then I opened for Russell Peters at one of his clubs. Many years later, and so I think he knew of me. But in the first few seasons, I had just heard from friends of mine that they did it. I heard the same things you had, but obviously now, after having been on the ships for a solid year at that point, I felt more confident that, my clean stuff was sharpened up again. I had kind of taken a bit of a hiatus from the road for a few years there, but I was sharp again. And so I reached out to them, and sight unseen, they booked me for October of 2019. yeah, from doing all this shit, I recorded 3 CDs and a dry bar special. It's almost like I knew the world was about to end, and I put a bunch of stuff out there.
Yeah.
But no, you go out there, and yeah, I mean, and they do some profit sharing with the comedians, but they pay you for the set in case that doesn't happen, and they give you a budget to travel and come up. And yeah, I mean, they treat you the way that I'd say every club used to treat you 20 years ago. And 20 years before that, clubs used to treat you even way better. I mean, comedy, the pay has been cut down to like a third of what it was, maybe even less. And the days have been cut down. Like in the early 80s, mid 80s, comedy was a 7-night-a-week thing, maybe 14 shows sometimes.
Yeah.
People just had less entertainment at home. People went out more often, and it was a cheaper night out. Mid-range comics were making $100,000 a year, or could.
Wow.
Now you're lucky if it's a weekend, they won't fly you out. Comedy's becoming a regional thing now with travel costs going up. There's not a lot of national road dogs just out there doing it.
Yeah.
You got to find your way into colleges, cruise ships, corporate parties, things like that.
Yeah.
And I figured that was also a way, and it has helped me. Doing a dry bar would let people know, hey, this guy can work clean. Here's proof of it for this amount of time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and when the economy's going well, and then they people tend to spend more money on morale boosting things like hiring a comedian or having a band at the corporate trade show or whatever it is. So artists tend to have more ways to support themselves as before. But the dry bar people treat you very well. It's a great crowd. They warm them up properly. The audiences are really there for comedy and are ready for it. So definitely one of my best experiences.
So one of the things that come along with comedy is bombing. It's something that you can't avoid. It's just part of the game, and it's something that you got to learn how to work around, deal with, and power through, so it doesn't happen again. Even though it probably will, but not as often. So let me ask, what's your worst bombing experience, Chris?
Well, I've been racking my brain trying to think of that, but I will. Before I tell you that, this is no one else's line. This is just my own little saying. If I was famous, maybe this would be on T-shirts. But let me say, if you stop bombing, you've stopped getting better.
I love that.
Because you're not trying anything new. You're not, even if it's not your act, you're trying new, a new audience, a new group of people. Are you killing in front of them, but you can't kill in front of them? Well, you're not really a comic yet. Until I can do both the biker bar and the corporate party, I'm not a comic yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of the worst ones, like on the way up, there were moments like that a little more frequently. But even then, I was always because I waited so long and had absorbed so much comedy before I ever stood on stage. I had a PhD in the art to learn how to get myself out of bombing experiences, but there's no way to avoid it. I'd say the worst one in recent memory did actually happen on a Princess cruise, Middle East. It was my first show of 4. I was still a little bit jet lagged. I had to fly into Dubai and catch the ship. Yeah. But I had on the suit. I was a little tired, but whatever. I've had that happen. You can feed off the audience and wake up. Carnival cruises are great about that.
Yeah.
But no, and I'd done well on Holland, and I'd done well on that last Princess cruise I mentioned to you. Yeah. But I walk out, and it's average age is about 75. It's British, Australian, Canadian, and American for the most part. There's some Chinese and Japanese and India, but they're not mostly in the show. Yeah. Audience is fairly full, but people had warned me too. They're like, the energy is usually kind of low. And I mean, even when the singers and dancers went out before me, I couldn't see them because I was on the side. They're like, oh yeah, no energy there. And I was like, okay. But I've heard that before and still had an okay set. Yeah. So I go out there, and first joke of the night, I did correctly, usually gets there's a smattering of maybe 18 chuckles in a room of 300 people.
Oh my gosh.
And I just remember thinking, I got to be up here for 45 more minutes. And I just knew, I don't even know if I have 45 minutes in my head right now because I was tired. I was planning on feeding off the audience and remembering other bits and getting to go places with them. I'm like, ugh. So, and I mean, I literally had almost borderline, not like a panic attack, literally, but I've had those where they start, giving you kind of like a, I start sweating a little bit, especially because I'm wearing a suit, which I normally don't do on stage, but on those gigs I did. So you're getting hotter, you're sweating more. I'm standing because I'm not sitting on the thing. I'm like, oh my God, am I going to get dizzy? Am I going to pass out 2 minutes into the set? The fear of that gets your blood moving faster. So I just kept talking, kept plowing through it. You kind of bury the next 2 punchlines, have a sip of water, and phew. But it was probably the most exhausting long set I've ever had on stage. And yeah, I mean, it was just a nightmare start to finish. I mean, some chuckles here and there, sometimes just staring at me, a few really good laughs, but they were very few and far between. And it was such a bad experience. And I still had 5 more days to be on the boat with these people.
Yeah.
That I didn't even go up to eat the whole next day. I ate in the downstairs galley. Like on some of the ships, as guest entertainers, we have the right to do both. We can eat down at the mess hall with the employees, or we can eat the good food up top. I didn't go up top for a whole day.
Wow.
And I mean, I just didn't want to run into anyone who had seen that show. Then, of course, I did 2 more shows that a few days later that went better, but the audience had whittled down to just people who wanted to see comedy.
Yeah, yeah. And there are times, dude, where, you can't get that stick. You cannot get that nose of the plane up. I mean, you're doing everything you can. And dude, you're just going to crash and burn. Now, let me ask you this. Are you the type of guy that, well, maybe you sort of answered the question with that particular experience, but I'll ask it anyway, just for a general response. Are you the type of person that can usually brush something like that off pretty easily, or does it take you a couple of days to get over?
It depends. If it's a show, like if it's a 10, 20-minute set that doesn't go as well in town, it's like, oh, whatever. It's usually in front of people who they've seen me kill. They've seen what I can do. It just didn't work. Or it's usually at a show where everybody did badly and there's nothing about my set that was wrong.
Yeah.
But no, but if it, like in that situation, I was still trying to get in with that cruise line. I didn't realize it would all grind to a halt after the pandemic, but I mean, I was feeding my family with it. I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to be accepted by as many lines as possible. And I was convinced, I'm like, oh, that's the last time. They're never going to have me back. I did another one for them the next month that was already scheduled and did a lot better. So I don't know, but in my head, I was like, oh man, I've ruined that. I'm going to have to get a day job again, or I'm going to have to try to go back in the row. Your brain stews a little bit more also because you have nothing else going on. My kids weren't there. My wife's not there. My friends aren't around. My parents aren't around. And there's nothing to do during the day but sit there and stew on it. Yeah. So those kind of situations stick with you normally just until you can get back on stage and do well, whether that's 10 minutes later or if you try to quit, which you shouldn't do, 10 months later. I mean, it's going to be in your head to some extent, whether it bothers you or not, until you get back on stage and remind yourself that you're good at this. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would totally agree with you. I think if you do something that, you know that you probably shouldn't have done, if you tell a joke in the wrong demographic, it usually works in this demographic or what have you, but you want to see if it can get over the plate here.
Yeah.
And in your mind, you're like, don't do it. Mm-hmm. What I mean? We as comedians, Chris, we can't help ourselves. We push barriers.
But they can feel that, though. The audience could feel you thinking, I shouldn't do it. It's like if you don't say it with confidence, even if they would otherwise like the bit, if they feel you pulling back, they'll pull back with you. The audience, they want to see confidence goes such a long way. And
it does. It does.
And I mean, there's no better confidence than just I don't need this. Like, I love this, but I don't need this. You need to have a little bit of that. They need to feel that you want to be on stage, but they also need to feel that their reaction isn't determining whether or not you're going to off yourself right after this. You ever see those people? Like, they're on stage so insecure that the audience is literally flinching, like they're afraid to laugh. They're afraid to not laugh. They can feel the insecurity of that person. Once you go out on stage, you just
That's good. That's good. My son, before I got to the venue, I was bouncing it off my whole family, and my oldest son was like, Dad, I don't think I'd tell that joke. I said, okay. So anyway, I'm like the headlining comic at this event. And that one joke, it's interesting you say that, because that one joke, man, I just fought myself for the entire time I was at the event until I went on stage. And when I went up there, I was killing.
Yeah.
But I'm still mulling this joke. And I said, you know what? If I get this one over the plate, I am the king. Mm-hmm. They will always. I was Chris. The flash bulbs. I mean, a cacophony of flash bulb lights were going off, dude. And I said, if I land this, I am the man.
Yeah.
And so, but at the same time, I'm fighting with myself. But should I do it?
Yeah.
And I let it rip. And man, it fell right off the table, Chris. It was bad.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, dude, it was horrible.
Well, another throw. Yes. Oh, no, go ahead.
No, just to piggyback on your point about the confidence that you had in the joke. If you're not confident about it, don't do it.
Yeah. And then another thing that actually happened at the Throckmorton, Robin Williams, rest in peace. He was backstage once, and I had said before, I think it was the day after the Colorado theater shooting. And the rule about those things, like you got to let some time pass. Or
yeah.
Steve Harvey famously told Jerry Seinfeld, he goes, "Let me let everybody in on a little secret. We have the jokes that night. We know you can't listen to them yet, and we got to wait, but we have the jokes that night." That's how we process things. And I go up on stage, and he's coming up right after me, and they don't know he's there, but he lived up there, so he came in a lot. And I'm doing good in the whole set, and then I did a joke about the Colorado shooting. It was something about how like some men were diving on their girlfriends to block them. I said, that sounds very romantic, but those women deserve that protection, because any woman watching a Batman movie at midnight, she's already taken one bullet that evening. Now, it's not it's a play on words of the phrase "take the bullet," meaning like I'm gonna do, but it's not a very well constructed joke, but it was, and it didn't fall flat. But boy, we're talking a markedly lower reaction than everything else I'd gotten. Like if everything else was a 7, this was a 3.
Yeah.
And then the very next joke, I had them right back at a 5, 6, 7, and they were fine. I did it in the middle, and then I got off stage, and I actually had this quote on my website for a while. Robin Williams looks at me, he goes, "You got effing balls, man." Like that. Like he was impressed that I would try it in front of the crowd, and I was like that. I said, boy, his reaction made that whole day.
Well, and that's why I say, Chris, that it's kind of our makeup, I think, as comics, to just push boundaries, even if you're not really sure, and it might even motivate us to do it anyway, because I don't know if this is going to work, but if it does work, it'll be great, and you let it rip. I don't, and I've done that a number of times, but on this particular occasion, because usually I don't care. If it doesn't work, I don't care. I loved it. I thought it was funny. You didn't like it. Okay, you'll get over it. We'll all get over it. We're going to get through this show. But this particular occasion, Chris, it was horrible, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't get the nose of the plane up. Yeah. I mean, those cartoons going down, you could hear the engine on the Bugs Bunny cartoons. I couldn't get the deck nose up, no matter what I said. After that, dude, it was over, and I was like, "Oh wow."
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you have gotten this down. There's comics I know, they get better laughs for their reactions at the audience not laughing than anything else. Like there are comics I knew, like they'd say something, and they go, "Oh, okay, I guess we're not doing that now." And the audience would kind of chuckle at their reaction to it not working. And I was like, I've never been able to pull that one off. When I say something I think is getting a good laugh and it doesn't, there's been times I've played it off well and gotten a laugh. But for the most part, I just kind of in my head go, okay, let's try something else. And I kind of just move on, which takes a little longer to build them back up. They still do. But, I've never really developed a thing to say or do to react to when I'm surprised that something didn't go well.
Well, it's like there are some comics that just have the ability where they don't care.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, fine. Well, I guess that was pretty bad, huh? I mean, exactly. But if you're so concerned about your image and how you're going to be portrayed and all those different things, which a lot of comedians are, it's hard to take that quote unquote bullet, as you said earlier, and just kind of like, well, that was really bad, and laugh it off, because we're so concerned about our image and we got to be on this level. I got to be performing well. And if I don't, like, for example, are you comfortable? You said you've been doing this for 21 years.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable in silence on stage?
Depends.
Okay.
I am if they are. Like there are some crowds like they like the quiet, and you can actually build up. You can tell stories. You can go a little while. I like punchlines per minute. That's a very American thing.
Yeah.
That makes other cultures either like our comedy more.
Yeah.
Most of them do, or some don't. Because if you find comics from other English-speaking nations, they're almost all storytellers. That's just a very popular style there.
Yes.
But for me, punchlines per minute, if they're comfortable in silence, I'm comfortable in silence. Like if I take them a place where they're not laughing, then the very next joke I do, they're right back with me. Then I don't fear silence with these people because they're just listening. But there are some crowds, especially when I was starting out and didn't have the confidence, and also if it's like a loud, rowdy, drunk bar situation, which I did too many of when I was younger. It kind of doctored my style in a bad way. Yes, silence there is death, because I mean, you let them be quiet. That's someone's going to yell something out at you because it's a drunken bar crowd. Someone's going to heckle and you got to deal with that, or someone's going to get up, or someone's going to drop something. You need to talk over every thought they can have. You need to have their every thought for the next hour.
Yes,
so
sir.
if I feel like that's who I'm dealing with, then then I hate silence, and then it makes me go too fast. I've got to like tell myself, because I'm naturally a fast talker. And I've had people even tell me, Eddie, you have a great comic who I opened for. He even said to me once, this is like 13 years ago, he goes, slow down. These people are idiots. Like, and he didn't mean that to insult them. He was just trying to tell me, he said, look, you're smarter than the crowd tonight. That doesn't happen all the time, but it's happening tonight. So don't treat them like they're idiots, but slow down, make them a part of it with you so they feel like they're laughing while being educated. Because, I already kind of come off like I'm a history professor lecturing anyway. So they're willing to be taught by somebody who sounds like me, but I've got to go slow enough that they get it.
I've got a good comedian friend by the name of Claiborne Cox out of Alabama, and he learned that skill set of just stopping after the punchline and just kind of staring at the audience.
Oh, yeah.
And just kind of let them drink in or digest or absorb the joke of the punchline, and then the laughs just start coming. It became a part of his style. But the biggest lesson learned from that is getting back to what you said about, okay, just let them get it.
Well, and it does create a control. I wish I had the confidence to do that more. That Billy D. Washington, another comic out of Houston. Houston was like my second home when I was more of a road dog. I used to headline the old Showcase and Laugh Stop a lot. Laugh Spot, not Laugh Stop.
Yeah.
But I ran into him on a cruise ships, and I saw him do this for like 10 shows over the course of a week.
Okay.
He wouldn't even say a word at first. He'd let the music play. He'd kind of sit there. He'd observe a few things. And he'd turn on the lights so he could see everybody the way they saw him. He just took absolute charge of that room completely non-verbally, to the point. And he literally had one heckler that I can remember in all 10 shows. And she was an awful person that was starting fights with everybody. Yeah. I wouldn't even count that. He took such charge of the room. Everyone thought they were handled. They could, that he was in charge. They could just be an audience. It relaxed them. Nobody would dare mess with him because they have that confidence that it showed to just, be okay in silence. And I'm only okay in silence like about half the time. It's my own issues from how I started out, but it just depends. Like I really feel and empathize with their feelings so strongly that, it's either a good or a bad energy, and I feel it very strong. So to overcome it and decide what the energy will be can sometimes be very difficult, but it is necessary.
It is. And then the other thing that I've learned and I've only been doing this dedicatedly for about 8 years. Okay. So I've learned that, you don't want to talk over the laughs either. It's like people are laughing at your joke. Let them enjoy the punchline. Yeah. And instead of just, all right, off to the next joke. That's something that I
did that on Laughs on Fox. I stepped on a few of my laughs by starting, and it kind of messed with their editing. But I still had really good set. But in my head, I had a certain amount that I wanted to get out in the time period I had up, and they were laughing harder than I was anticipating. So I only made it through like 5 minutes in an 8-minute set. But by the end, I understood, like, just let it all go, let it. But they got sound. We're not killing. We're not getting paid by the punchline here. So I just sort of let them. But again, it's something I have to constantly practice. It's definitely not instinctive on my part.
No, there's something you just got to practice. I mean, my wife has even told me. She said, "You know what? You left that subject too quickly. Like they want a couple more on that subject." Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've learned how to write that way as well. It's like, good gosh, how far can I go with the laughs on this? Because the audience is kind of like bummed if you just go to another topic. So it's just so many things to learn. Like I said, I've only done it dedicatedly for 8 years. You've been in the business for 21. I'm sure, without a doubt, Chris, you've seen just about everything there is to see up there.
Yeah, well, I hesitate to say that out loud because then you'll see something new. But right. You're always learning. If you, like I said, if you stop learning or you stop bombing, you stop learning. It's the same thing. You're always learning. You're never done.
Chris, I got to tell you, this has been a great conversation, man. I could do a 2-hour show with you easily in my sleep. And I didn't get the chance to ask half the questions that I wanted to ask.
Forgive my long-winded answers, but it's a lot to you're asking good questions. It's a lot to cover.
Oh, no, man, believe me, I enjoyed every minute of it. I like I said, I just wish I had more time. This was a great convo. I like maybe down the road to do another show with you.
I'd love it anytime.
Great commentary, my friend. Before we get out of here, is there any advice you'd like to leave young, aspiring comedians?
To young comedians, I would say the game changes every decade or less. Right now, it's about your online footprint, but that doesn't mean you get to skip a lot of steps. It actually just makes them more important. You don't need to move to LA or New York. That's a relief. But you got to make sure these punchlines are good and look amazing before you put a lot of stuff on YouTube. Don't put a lot of my learning curve was on VHS tapes. I could pitch those right in the garbage because by the time YouTube was a thing, I had 5-6 years in the game and I could actually control what was good and everything like that. Don't put it out there until it's ready. And your opinion isn't really the one that matters on is it ready? I mean, for confidence and for writing, write for you. But remember, it's not called show art. It's called show business. The art needs to be your creative process. The business end is, okay, this show is about me and from me, but the performance has to be about them. And that's the biggest advice I would give them. It's like they've got to feel that you're not just doing free therapy up there. You know, you've got to be making the show. It's about me, but it's for you.
Yeah. And, that's one thing my wife actually took. There's one joke that my wife can't stand, but she's from Brazil. So there's kind of a culture difference. So she doesn't really get the cultural aspect of it. So she's like, I don't like that joke. I don't like that joke. But she told me, she said, you know what? I can't tell you to not tell the joke because everybody laughs every time.
Yeah.
And that's just to piggyback on what you said about it is about the audience.
Mm-hmm. No, that's something that gets lost in the offended culture is like someone will come up after stage. I was so offended when you did it. Yeah, well, 90% of the audience laughed. So what do you want me to do? Get rid of it because you had a problem with it?
Right.
It's like your mother died in a drunk driving accident, so no one should ever talk about alcohol or cars. It's like I don't even get that as an audience member. That's selfishness. It's like I've lost everybody in my family because of cancer. And not only am I not offended by cancer jokes, I insist on them. Please make me laugh at this. I don't mind if you swing or miss, but try. Laughter is good for something that's tight like that. I mean, for something that's tense, you want to laugh at it. You don't want to avoid it. And so when the audience feels like it's for them, also, they're more likely to forgive ones that don't sit right. Like they can say, like they laughed at 3 or 4 things. The 5th one, they're like, that one wasn't as good. Because, we'll just move on to the next one. If they feel like you're up there for them, then they just feel like they opened a present and they opened 10 presents from you. The 8th and the 9th one I didn't like, but I like the rest. They're not always going, okay, this guy's up there just ranting. He's not even trying to make this a show. They're looking for a reason to hate every word out of your mouth. So.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. Chris, how can fans follow you on social media or contact you for booking?
Yeah, well, I actually, and I have a Facebook fan page that has a lot of connections to it. Just put in my name, Chris Strait, and a bobblehead icon will be me. They gave those to everybody on True TV. But I have 2 channels on YouTube. C, my first initial and last name, STRAIT, will get you to all my comedy clips and sketches and things like that. A little bit more topically irreverent. So if you're only a fan of the clean comedy, then just look up my dry bar comedy stuff. But and I have CDs on Spotify, Pandora, iTunes that are all there if you put my name in. And I also have a vlogging channel called Strait Talk, spelled like my last name. Strait Talk is a vlogging channel on YouTube as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you have enjoyed our interview today with Chris Strait, please subscribe to my comedy channel, Maurice Brown Comedy Channel. Like and share. And also you can see this later on this evening on Roku TV on the Creative Motion Network. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with the very funny and the very talented Chris Strait. Thank you, Chris, for being on the show, man. May the peace of Christ be with you and your family, brother. God bless you.
Thank you. To you as well, Maurice. Thanks again for having me.
Amen.